All right, everybody, we're back after a little hiatus. We're back with Jedediah and Luke and Jason, and we're going to, well, we think we're going to finish up, but we'll see how far we get. Does somebody want to start reading? Jed, do you want to read?
I can.
Sure, I can go ahead and read.
Okay.
Okay, but he will not therefore pass over that intellectual structure without which the other could not be manifested. He will not forget the builder while he admires the architect, while he dwells with delight on the relation of the peculiar arch to the meaning of the whole cathedral. He will not think it needless to explain the principles on which it is constructed, or even on how those principles are carried out in the actual process. Neither yet will the tracery of its windows, the foliage of its crockets, or the fretting of its moldings be forgotten. Every beauty will have its word. Only all beauties will be subordinated to the final beauty, that is, the unity of the whole. Should I continue? Or we want to stop there?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Okay.
Well, whatever. What do you want to do?
Well, since I missed the last time, I don't have much context, but I'll go for this other paragraph too. Thus doing, he shall perform the true office of friendship. He will introduce his pupil to the society which he himself prizes most, surrounding him with the general presence of the high-minded. That this good company may work its own kind in him who frequents it.
So I think here he's talking about culturing the imagination. This is just before that. Previously, he talked about letting a child, know when he's being silly, so that he's not, and and that paragraph right before where you started, it's very short, just one sentence. Especially must he endeavor to show the spiritual scaffolding or skeleton of any work of art, those main ideas upon which the shape is constructed and around which the rest group as ministering dependencies. And then he gets into that whole construct that you just read. And what came to my mind, I don't know if any of you listened to Jess's reading of The Castle, but that's what came to my mind actually while you were reading that, because in The Castle, he literally does that, right? He has this building, and it has windows and, arches and foliage and all this stuff in it anyways.
George MacDonald's Castle, the short story. Oh, yeah, I didn't know. The Castle. I didn't know Jess read that. I'm glad more people are reading these short stories. That one's great.
Yeah,
too.
Jess did a really good reading of it.
That's cool.
Yeah. George is being resurrected.
Yeah, I know. It's insane. 100 years later. His short stories. He's got. So this is the one you mentioned the other day, the Golden Key, and it's got like 4 other stories in it. But you can get like a collection of these, and it's 4 books. I don't know which one the castle is in, but they're like a collection of his short stories, and they're all really, really good.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I like the part where that Jed just read, where it said, the unity of the final beauty is the unity of the whole, and how he's talking about a cathedral and things like that. What popped into my mind was that Andrew Bird song. Do you guys know Andrew Bird?
Yeah.
He's got this song called Cathedral in the Dell, and it's just here I can read a little bit of the lyrics, but it's the cathedral in Cologne looks like a spaceship, like the hand of God falling from the sky. 1,000 stone-carved saints hang like icicles, but icicles don't take 1,000 years to die. And all of us who worked on this cathedral, or even spent a moment passing by, all of us are swept away like breadcrumbs. What comfort does it bring? Soaring towers left behind, towers left behind. So I don't know. I just always like that song of his, but just like even the people that just take a moment to pass by and look at it are kind of like somehow kept up in it. And yeah,
it's interesting because that like what what sticks out to me is just this sentence, because it's a really interesting one. And I'm wondering how, because I've lost a little bit of context in the discussion, is where he says he will not forget the builder while he admires the architect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you guys see him demarcating the difference between the builder and the architect?
Well, the builder and the architect, the builder and the architect for him are the intellect and the imagination. The intellect is the builder. The architect is the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the biggest pain in my butt is the architect. Because I'm the one building the structure and dealing with the practicality of
That makes sense.
of the building process. So like the little I'm seeing this as unity and multiplicity playing off each other, like the particularity of each, you know, in the concreteness of that thing that, you know, I might be engaging in an embodied way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the builder has that experience. The architect is abstracted from that. Not that the architect isn't needed, because I'd be lost without those plans, right? So like,
right.
I'm kind of being a little tongue in cheek with my like.
No, but it's true. You know, the first thing I thought of, Luke, was the master and his emissary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the builder, the intellect is the left hemisphere, and the architect, the imagination, is the right hemisphere. And I mean, McGilchrist also would, I think he would totally agree with that, right?
But it,
yeah,
like you are though very much like, okay, so like the way that the, like, how do you even get to the whole, or the unity of the whole, without all the multiplicity? Like there is no.
Well, I think like it's just interesting that the cathedral is being used too, right? Because like the builder quite literally was a whole community of people over long centuries before the architect's vision was attained, right? So you have like, all you can know if you're the mason is the stonework. All you can know if you're the glazer is the glasswork, you know, and like all you can know if you're the carpenter is the woodwork, you know. And it's like, you may only, like in the construction of cathedral, you may only know a very small area of the whole, right? You could be working on like the nave or something like that, but you may not be aware of, you know, what's going on, you know, in the word narthex, right? That, you know, like you may not know what's going on in the whole, because you are consumed with your role in the particular.
Yeah.
But it's not as if you've not been inspired by the architect's vision, in a sense of like, you have to have some sense of how those things are going to fit together, right?
I mean, you could probably, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I kind of think that modernity is like, it's like the builders forgot that there was an architect, and everybody is expressing how their little niche specialization is the most important thing. You know, they've lost the picture of the whole. Like in the castle, in George MacDonald's short story, The Castle itself is draped in mist, fog. And you only get to like, nobody ever gets to see the whole thing. It's kind of Piranesi-like in the sense that it's this, you know, sprawling giant thing, and you only, you know, you see a turret sticking out some days, and other days it's covered, and nobody has a full picture of the castle itself. And there's undiscovered rooms in it and so on, right? And that's exactly how he describes everybody in the castle. They're all doing their own thing, and they're all, you know, quarreling with each other. They're all brothers and sisters, by the way, from the same family. And they're all quarreling with each other about their area of expertise.
Yeah.
Sounds like a building trade. I mean, I'm of the opinion that the plumber is always right, but you know.
Well, you don't want to make him mad. You need that toilet.
It kind of reminded me when we were talking about doing your part when Jed was talking about the stonemason and the glass worker and all those things. Reminded me of this part in Phantastes where he was talking about his shadow, but then he says, I looked around the shadow where to be seen ere long that I learned it was not myself, but only my shadow that I had lost. I learned that it is better 1,000-fold for a proud man to be humbled than to hold up his head in his pride and fancied innocence. And then this part, I learned that he that will be a hero will barely be a man, and that he will be nothing but a doer of his work, is sure of his manhood. So I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of that. Like you're just, and when Jonathan Peugeot was talking about faith recently, like like where you're mentioning, Sherry, you're kind of doing your own thing, but you're doing it in service to God and trusting him that it'll be a part of the whole. And like people now, I think, have lost sight of the greater imagination or something, and they're focused on their one thing. But if and you should be focused on your one thing, but it should be in dedication to God. And this might be a little controversial, but I kind of just wanted to bring up this, this idea. There's something like when I frame it in terms of me and God, and I'm trying to be humble, I think there's something incredibly almost like precious and beautiful about it. And I think it maybe is the idea of holiness. But when we were in India, when we went with the group, we, like the last day, my sister tries to plan something fun for the group on the trip. So we went to drove all the way out to the middle of some freaking desert to see the Taj Mahal. And it's basically this big like tomb built for this queen. When they were building it, this is what they told us, that it's like just got all this incredible detail with like little gemstones, and they had all these artists work on it. And they told us that basically they had slave laborers, and then they would have this one artist make this small little portion, and then they would cut off one of his hands so he could never do it again. So it would be just for this temple. And it sounds like horrifying, but then at the same time, I'm like, there's some idea of holiness in that. Not holiness, but just the way it's so set apart that this one thing is so dedicated.
Can't be replicated. It can't be replicated.
Yeah, and it'll never.
Now,
it's
now
so
it can.
Pure, and
now we have AI.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But when I was thinking about it, like it sounds awful, like when you're thinking of it in terms of that. But then if I'm thinking of in terms of me dedicating a work to God, it's almost like I would want him to do something like that. I'm like, here's this one thing. Now, like, you know, this is dedicated to you. Let it be set apart, holy, and serve it for whatever is in your grand design or whatever. But even thinking about that, I mean, just like years, I don't know how old that place is, but people flock to that place, and it is incredibly beautiful. And the way, like, the color of the stones change in the moonlight, it's just like everything that they did there is just insane. But I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking like another interesting like relationship between builder and architect is the difference between contemplation and action. Right. And like it's something, Jason, that you had read there kind of struck me as far as just like this commitment to action, right? And there's a decisiveness in the way that we move and we act in the world. But if that isn't joined with like some contemplation about you know, why the action, you know, what is the action that I would like to take, and like that imagination process, right, that informs the actions that we carry out, we wouldn't actually be able to create, right? If you were so fully committed to the domain and the field of action that you don't take that time, then all you are is kind of a worker bee, right? Which is nothing wrong with that. But if you're talking about like engaging in the creative enterprise, then you have to have both disciplines, the ability to do both and to know the proper time and place for one or the other.
You know, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking that like the worker bee can be doing the kind of work with which their body is engaged, but their mind is not.
Yeah.
Right? Like they can literally just be thinking about anything while they sweep or shovel or whatever it is. I do a lot of that kind of stuff.
Well, and then like if your creative writing would be kind of like you're kind of there's a recursive process that's constantly happening between the contemplative and the deliberative, the actions.
Right. So that's what I wanted to get to, was that when it's creative, you have the mind and the body working in tandem, where the mind is actually focused on what the body is doing. It becomes the architect and the body becomes the builder, right? Because it's like, I'm thinking about myself spinning. Like, if I'm trying to spin something that needs to be a certain diameter because I'm going to make I'm going to make socks. So I have to make sock yarn, and sock yarn is really fine. And I'm going to have to apply 2, singles together. So that means the one single is going to have to be more fine than the finished product, and so my body determines the diameter. Literally, I feel how thick it is, right? And my mind is at the same time calculating, so like it's kind of it's the kind of work that, like a painter, even, if you're painting a picture and you want certain color and you want certain structure and you want the light to look a certain way, and you can't think about something else while you're doing it. You're completely engulfed, like mind and body, it would seem to me, that in a creative process. Same with writing, right? There's something interesting about the mind-body disconnect, like how we can do that. St. Paul says, I do the things I don't want to do, and the things I want to do, I don't do, right? So there's this hesitation between what's happening here and what's happening here. And I think when people are in that flow state that Vervaeke talks about, they're actually, the mind and the body are working in tandem. Like it's a thing that is very spiritual in a sense.
Well, I think that the flow state is an approximation of like what the resurrection experience is.
Yeah, because to me, it's like a marriage of heaven and earth. Like if you look at Matthew Pageau's definition of heaven as being the thing up, the highest thing. Well, what's the highest thing on our body, right? So you have heaven and you have earth, right? Yeah. Anyway,
I think that the quote from Romans 7 is interesting, because I think that the builder also must, like in the field of action, has to contend with himself, right? Everybody who's ever worked an 8-hour shift, a hard 8-hour shift, knows that like there's a difference between those shifts when you're mailing it in and when you're actually being productive. And you have controlled yourself to the point where you can be effective in what you do. And so there is that sense where, to be the effective builder, you're using your body, but in some senses you're also overcoming at least its tendency towards stasis, right? To move toward, you're fighting against the current of entropy in order to accomplish work.
Right? Yeah, that's where you become the overcomer, right? Yeah, the overcomer. Yeah.
Yeah, I keep on thinking of the builder and the architect thing, and I think there is this this thing too that I see in a lot of people where they can design it, but then when it actually comes down to doing the
detail,
the actual work, it's like, or even like I've had the countless conversations with people about, let's all chip in on a property and we'll all build these little tiny houses on it and do the whole communal thing, and you'll have this grand vision. And then you realize that you might be the only one actually doing the work or something like that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if you're the one actually doing the work while all these other people are sitting back and they're doing the designing or the and I'm not saying that that's not important. That's super important, and maybe you need a division of labor in that sort of way, but I don't know. They're both indispensable. I don't know what
they are, but I know exactly what you're trying to say, because I think that like there's a if the architect's providing the tears, it's the builders that are providing the blood and the sweat, right? And I think that it's
this is why I like the analogy that George MacDonald uses, because he doesn't diminish the builder. He doesn't diminish the intellect. He actually wants you to engage the intellect, right? Like, I can't remember where it is, but he talks specifically about them as architect and builder. I could look it up.
When we have I think even kind of being close to the trades, one of the things that I know is like the catastrophic shortage we have in like skilled trade labor, right? And just about any major trade, it's across the board, is that we are in a society that doesn't place a value on that kind of work, right? And there's kind of that builder work, the grunt work even, that goes into the creative process of attaining any creative outcome, right? I mean, you can be the most inspired dude in the world, but if you don't put in the time and the effort to put pen to paper or to put, paint to canvas, whatever it is, like, then you haven't really accomplished anything, right? There's an incompletion. And it's not to say, hey, if you just like getting lost in your own thoughts and that's something that you enjoy as just a personal practice, that's wonderful. But if you're like engaging in the process of creativity, like you can't undervalue exactly like what McDonald's talking is. You cannot undervalue the activity of the builder. And like, let's say if you're writing like long form fiction, like there is an excruciating amount of labor that goes into crafting a novel, right? It will take years off of your life, and but it's invigorating at the same time, but you're definitely contending the whole way through. Right. And so, there's that element of just the actual work. And I think that, Luke, your point to like the commune, like it's ideally it's nice, but then you have to have also a community of people that actually value not just the work in the abstract, but actually value getting their dirt under their fingernails and making it happen and contributing.
Yeah. Let me just read this quote really quick. I found it here. So he says earlier on in the essay, he says, shall then the human intellect, we ask, come into readier contact with the divine imagination than that human imagination? The work of the higher must be discovered by the search of the lower in degree with which it is yet similar in kind. Let us not be supposed to exclude the intellect from a share in every highest office. Man is not divided when the manifestations of his life are distinguished. McGilchrist has been talking about this, a distinction without division, and this is exactly what George is doing here. The intellect, quote, is all in every part. There were no imagination without intellect, however much it may appear that intellect can exist without imagination. What we mean to insist upon is that in finding out the works of God, the intellect must labor workmanlike under the direction of the architect, imagination. Herein, too, we proceed in the hope to show how much more than is commonly supposed the imagination has to do with human endeavor, how large a share it has in the work that is done under the sun. So that's his little spiel at the beginning about the intellect. He gives it a fair, where it belongs.
I don't know what the noise is. It's extremely interesting to me thinking of the architect as the imagination, because it almost, the way it speaks about imagination kind of, in my mind, makes me think about something like hope, like kind of a further up and further in. But it has this way of reaching downward and gathering all things to itself, which like normally when I think of an architect, it almost seems like more tyrannical or something in my mind, not in a bad way, but just kind of like you have a design. And so once you have the design structure, then you're going to exclude because you just want to gather and create this one design. But if I'm thinking of the architect, the imagination, it's kind of always bringing in new things and collecting the whole and bringing everything into that that
Well,
fullness.
well, and like, with the architecture image too, with the imagination, is like architecture is a highly disciplined art, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's not, you start with that sense impression of the sense of what you want to make, but you have to like stack image upon image upon image upon image in your mind, and then you are still doing the builder work of the actual,
Yeah.
doing your architectural drawings, mock-ups,
Hmm.
right? And so,
Yeah.
like, there's the imagination isn't just like a good idea, right? It's not it's not excluding the good idea, but it's not just that.
Mhm.
It's the willingness to play with the idea until you have a fully formed concept that is
Yeah.
then able to be put into action, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you call that something like the how?
Yeah, there's the what, and then there's the how, in terms of how is this going to come together, and the architect has to be aware of how it's going to come together.
The how, yeah. The how is
Yeah,
really,
Yeah.
and I mean, and then you're going to consult your structural engineers, and you got all kinds of
Yeah.
people that are your mechanical engineers, your electrical engineers. Like, there's a lot of that kind of knowledge work that goes into what the trades have to execute, right? And so it's not just, in a sense, the builder and the architect, there's this blending of the two
Mhm.
at all times. So there's like this co-creative, because the architect has to think enough like a builder to be able to come up with an adequate design that a builder can actually execute.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's a really interesting concept of the
or you can just
imagination.
be really ornery and design something that builders have to get really
Or
frustrated.
you can be, there's those few of those really like auteur architects that do not work with plans. They just describe what they want, but they have to
Yeah.
work with builders that they absolutely trust, and those builders definitely hate them
Well,
at the same time.
yeah, that's what I
A
mean.
little
That's why I think
bit.
the idea of the imagination being the architect is fascinating to me, because my sister's actually an architect and she's an incredibly creative person as well. And that's what it makes me think, because she's constantly in communication with the Hezi's an architect as well,
Mhm.
but she's in communication with the with like the
I
engineers
didn't
and
know
all
that
that
Hezi was an
stuff, and having
architect.
to
Mhm.
work out these different things. Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's an architect. I wanted to mention it because he,
Get in
That's
here.
cool.
yeah,
We just happen
yeah,
to be talking about it all.
That is
yeah.
so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, and I come from a construction family, but my uncle is an architect and has designed some fairly notable buildings in the San Diego area. So it's kind of interesting to
cool.
see, and we've even done some construction on a few of the projects that he's designed. So it's really interesting to kind of see that come together, because I'll, sit, over his desk and look over the plans, and he'll discuss what it's going to look like, and then you're the one that's out there putting it in.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's
What's
just
what's
fascinating.
UI UX? What's that?
UX is user experience, and then UI, I believe, is user interface. Michael, is that correct?
Is
I'm
that
thinking.
software?
We're talking. Yeah, it's anything
Software
technology.
architecture? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Convergence versus divergence. I'm all about that. Like, I always want to talk about how we come together, not how
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I was thinking it was interesting having
I'm the
the
kumbaya person.
yeah. Well, that's why I thought it was interesting with the imagination thing, because you have God as the highest architect, and it's something like the imagination. He's looking at the whole and looking at his whole creation and finding the proper place for every single thing. And that's why, because even building like my uncle's cabin or something, like we'll sit there and he'll have his blueprint, his design. My sister helped him design it. And then we'll go to build something and like, we'll cut a board too short. And it's like, well, I guess, or, you just kind of like, once you're in it, you're just going, and then you kind of have to almost redo things, or then something doesn't work right, so then redo the design. And it's like the highest architect, the one who came up with the plan, is still imaginative. So when you encounter these things where you're like, okay, this didn't quite fit right, it's able to recalculate and regather and restructure in a way that's still somehow pushing toward that final grand design. but it's still like trying to include all these things and accounting for all the little you could, some people call them failures or blemishes or things like that, but it actually usually become like little forms of beauty or things like that, you know. And I think it's because the architect is imaginative that's actually how that happened or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
Okay,
I think one of sorry, did you want to dive back in?
You go ahead with your thought.
No, I just was thinking like at a broader level, like this is also kind of the structure and nature of our reality, right? Is that the architect, the one who has designed us from the beginning, is provides the image and the inspiration that we are growing into and being built up and formed through our experiences. Is actually our experience of the world is a part of our creation toward that completion, right? And that's why Jesus is such this shining example, is that he's completed and perfected in death, right? And for us, like, we don't all have like heroic deaths or anything like that, but it provides sets a framework of understanding, is that is through my experiences and my reactions and my actions based on the experiences that I have had, that I'm involved in my own formation as a response to that sense of the image of God within me, right? And so I think we're all involved in that process, that creative process. And I think we all know that those times in our lives when we're living close, where that sense of the divine image of God in us is resonating, like God's idea of who we are is resonating with the way we're living. And there's a powerful spiritual cohesion to that. And we feel disjointed when that's not always the case. So anyway, it was just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's true.
There was something else you, Jed, but we can get back to this, but you want to touch on it before if you have to go, give me like a little bit of a heads up or something.
Go ahead. I do have to go in about 10 minutes.
Well, you just said this phrase, and I wanted to see if I got it right. You said something like the architect provides the tears. Is that what you said? And the builder provides the sweat and blood?
Mm-hmm.
Could you expand on that a little bit more when you were saying the tears?
Right.
What did you mean by that?
Like the tears of inspiration, like when you're overcome with that breathtaking idea that, or you could substitute the architect for the composer, right? And the builder for the musicians, right? Is like, obviously the composer is himself or herself a musician, but they take on a different role. And, you think of that moment of inspiration and think of like a wonderful symphony, is like there's tears in those symphonies. You can feel them, right? The inspired process is the tears of inspiration. And so that was what my thought was, kind of, is that when the architect is providing the tears, it's their inspiration. It's their, hopefully if you're in a creative field, like Hezy's in a creative field, sounds like Michael's in a creative field, that's deep sense of not only satisfaction, but awe and wonder. And there's even sometimes a sense of melancholy in a fantastic idea that you just can't wait to share with the world. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I was thinking or tears of joy, like something that brings your heart joy. That's where I was thinking of the tears supplied by the architect. That was what I meant. Yeah,
that's really cool. It's incredibly fascinating. I'm not sure what to do with it yet, because it makes me a little bit of Mary and Martha as well.
I was imagining Kezzy and Michael with this tormented, crazy professor hair thing going on. Just sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Oh no, it's fine. It made me think of Martha and Mary a little bit, and one of them, is weeping, and she anoints the head of Christ, and his feet too, and then Martha was like working. I'm not sure what that did that, or if that even connects properly.
I know exactly how Martha felt. By the way, I felt like Martha for many years of my life, just like doing the dishes. Why is she just? I have a sister like Mary. My sister is just like, woo, you know, and I'm scrubbing and cleaning and mopping. And
I always had a very well-timed bathroom break at the end of the meal.
Oh, I had a brother like
Usually
you
involved
too.
a good book.
I had a brother like you too. It'd be like,
I still get teased about it, and the family still gives me a hard time. So Jed, it's about dinner time's about over, so you're gonna be done just about when the dishes are over. I'm like,
probably
if everything goes according to plan. And sometimes I don't even go to the bathroom. I'll just sit on the countertop with the book.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna read this next paragraph. So we ended with what did we end with?
Frequents it. Him who
goes
He will
but he will
introduce his
likewise.
pupil into the society which he himself prizes the most, surrounding him with the genial presence of the high-minded, that this good company may work its own kind in him who frequents it. But, so this is again getting into the culture of the imagination. But he will likewise seek to turn him aside from such company, whether of books or of men, as might tend to lower his reverence, his choice, or his standard. He will therefore discourage indiscriminate reading, like when he's supposed to be doing the dishes.
This isn't
Right?
connecting at all.
No. and that worse
Don't worry,
than
he's
waste.
crying in the bathroom. That's where the tears are happening.
He will therefore discourage indiscriminate reading, and that worse than waste, which consists in skimming the books of a circulating library. I like how George gets in. He gets right into the details. No skimming. He knows that if a book is worth reading at all, it is worth reading well. And that, if it is not worth reading, it is only to the most accomplished reader that can be worth skimming. He will seek to make him discern, not merely between the good and the evil, but between the good and the not so good. And this not for the sake of sharpening the intellect, still less of generating the self-satisfaction, which is the closest attendant upon criticism, but for the sake of choosing the best path and the best companions upon it. A spirit of criticism for the sake of distinguishing only, or far, far worse, for the sake of having one's opinion ready upon demand. Oh, that's far worse for George. I like that. Is not merely repulsive to all true thinkers, but is in itself destructive to all thinking, of all thinking. A spirit of criticism for the sake of the truth, a spirit that does not start from its chamber at every noise, but waits till its presence is desired, cannot indeed garnish the house, but can sweep it clean. Were there enough of such wise criticism, there would be 10 times the study of the best writers of the past, and perhaps 1/10 of the admiration for the ephemeral productions of the day. A gathered mountain of misplaced worships would be swept into the sea by the study of one good book. And while what was good in an inferior book would still be admired, the relative position of the book would be altered and its influence lessened. That's really good advice. Any thoughts?
I got a but.
Okay, let's hear it.
So I hear him on this. I'm going to argue with George a little bit here because he comes across sounding a bit like an aesthete. And there is I don't think it's just in this paragraph. So it's not necessarily a criticism of all his work, but there is that sense of like this is lofty and this is high and this is worthy and that is low and that is base and that's unworthy, that oftentimes is going to boil down to an aesthetic choice, right? So my girlfriend plays in a punk rock band. It is clearly not Mozart, but I like that lower art form as well, right? Because it's a vehicle for a different kind of expression, right?
Hell yeah.
So, so it's just like there is but is that the ability to draw out beauty and meaning even from the seemingly incongruous and the slightly off-putting. I delight in that, right? And so that's where my but comes from. And I don't disagree with this broader point overall. Like you can, like I think it's when you're talking about artistic creation, right? There is a sense where there's a preferential element to that, that's not, that can be, swept up in the poetry of Coleridge, and at the same time captivated by the poetry of Anne Sexton.
Okay, so let me say this. Everything you just said is based on the assumption that George MacDonald wouldn't like punk rock.
Well, I think in this paragraph he sounds like he might not, but I don't think that in his other works. That's why I'm saying it's not like a broad sense. Like there is an earthiness and a grittiness to some of his writing too. You know what I mean? So I don't think he would disagree with the broader point. It's just,
I don't think so. Yeah. So like what I see here, and I agree with him. Like he talked about this earlier when he said, remember we were discussing the art that he says you should, put on your walls.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that part of the essay?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get good art, and if not, surround yourself with books. He doesn't say what books, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he's giving you the option, but
there definitely are standards. Like I do think there's a difference between a good book and a bad book. You know what I mean? So I'm with him on that too.
Yeah.
It's just a little critique there.
Yeah. But I think that what he's mostly saying here is that you shouldn't be wasting your time with just everything, like skimming and, paging. And if you're going to read something, if it's worth reading, read it, right?
TikToking.
And yeah, I mean, this would be the, 1850s version of scrolling, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Essentially. And then he says that, the study of one good book, and while what was good in an inferior book would still be admired. So he's not saying that you can't admire something below that, right?
Yeah.
It would be altered and its influence lessened, which is exactly true if you think about it in terms of TikTok and scrolling.
Yeah.
Right? That whole experience would be altered and it would be lessened if you spent time focused on the, the really...
Or like a theological analogy. Like I think there were times in my life where I was very captivated with a very narrow range of theology. So let's say like Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology, a very popular evangelical book, and you're thinking, I'm getting the real meat. And then you read a Meister Eckhart, or you read a Dionysius the Areopagite, or Sergei Bulgakov, and you realize like, well, like not everything Grudem, I don't agree with his theology, but not everything he has to say is garbage, right? But like it's like the difference between,
it gives you the ability to
like there's a sense of quality there that is significantly different.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that word quality is because like I'm even thinking of the way in which some people, when they speak, they're not so eager. Like in that paragraph, he talks about sharing an opinion versus almost waiting until your opinion is actually of value or desired to be heard versus just sharing your opinion in a willy-nilly way. So half the time. So like delivering something at the right time can even increase the way in which it resonates with someone else. Like I wonder if that delay where you might know what to say right then and there, but is it the right time, or could it be delayed and have a more profound effect? Or I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I get what you're saying. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, this is about culturing and imagination. And this essay is written to educators, right? So you're dealing with young people who are stepping out, and you want to give them, the best possible chance to cultivate a good imagination.
Well, and sometimes like you want, like, for those that are like kind of, into what we may call like the lower arts, if you're exposing yourself into the higher arts, right, where you have,
I have a feeling,
you
George
have like that,
MacDonald would have loved Calvin and Hobbes, for example. I have a feeling he would
right,
have loved it.
right.
You
And
know?
I actually
which
had
the comic book is, it's a pretty
it's
low,
pulled
it's
up.
the comic
It's
is like
already here.
Sorry, Dad.
it's a low form of art. It's considered low art, but Watterson elevated that low, simple artistic form
Mhm.
into, like, he transcended the form.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
he's taken something low and has made it a form of truly high art, just because of the skill with which he was bringing to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually had a strip pulled up on my phone. I was waiting to bring it up because it was
Go for
because
it.
this paragraph reminded me of it. I was just sent it to you in the Discord, Sherry. But it's this.
Yeah.
It actually often made me think of my intellect when this strip comes to mind, and it's just Calvin, and it starts and it's got this city, and so it's just kind of showing the city built on the seacoast, and then this great tidal wave comes in and like out the city, and then it zooms out and it's got Calvin's like standing at the ocean, and the sandcastle is just like hit with this wave, and he's just laughing about
Yeah.
it. And his dad's like, it's so stupid he's building that so close to the shore, and his mom's like, he doesn't seem to mind it though. But I've felt that way with my intellect in the same way, I think. And so like the last half of this paragraph seems like the way George MacDonald is talking about deconstructionism in a way. It's kind of like there's a correct and a proper way to do it, and there's actually a wise way to do it. But I've felt that way, like even with theological ideas I've had in the past, where I just get to this point where it's almost like I've built up this sandcastle of my own ideas or intellect, tapped to this point of just like almost offering it to God and letting Him just create a wave and wash it away, or whatever
Well,
doesn't need to be there.
if you
It can
think
wash
about
away.
if you think about it in terms of the castle, where you have the castle and it's portions of it are covered in this mist, okay?
Mhm.
And each day, the weather's shifting, the clouds are moving, and the mist is coming up and down, and more is revealed, less is revealed. It's always different, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this thing about deconstructionism that really bothers me, and it's this all or nothing feeling about it, right? It's like you can't lose just a little bit of it. You got to just throw the whole thing out. Like this is why we have these, throwing the baby out with the bathwater cliche kind of thing, right? Because this is what we tend to do. Like we think in black and white and all or nothing and all those wonderful psychiatric terms.
I do them both at the same
Psych
time.
word. But it's like, how do you allow yourself to have enough compassion on your own lack of knowledge, right? So that you can actually build on it. Okay, so I made, I might have only been at number 1 on the ladder, the first rung on the ladder. Does that mean I have to just smash the ladder?
I'm so sorry that I got to jump in. I've enjoyed this so much, but I actually do have a couple quick things I need to take care of before I kind of close my night out. So I just wanted to say
Thanks,
this has
Ed,
been
for joining us.
absolutely wonderful. Love you guys. Thanks for having
Love you
me.
too, man.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care.
Yeah, so like what I was saying is, do you just smash the whole ladder, or do you give yourself the grace to climb the next rung?
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is you got to start somewhere. You do. You got to start somewhere. I mean, if you knew me, 40 years ago, you would be like, okay, lady, right? We just don't, we got to give ourselves the grace. And this is the beauty. Well, to me, this is how God operates. He's so gracious.
Yeah.
He's so gracious to us. He just keeps, he'll just kind of peel back a little bit of the veil, did you see this? And then you, I gotta, this is the golden key, right? That's what it is. Like, he goes out and he sees it, but then it's dark and suddenly he has to wait. He has to wait until the morning when the light shines on it again and he can find it. And that's just, and then he doesn't know what it's for. His first intention is to sell it, because he thinks he can make some money because it's gold, right? And then he realized, no, that's not, and it's okay. It's okay.
She says better never to find it than to sell it.
Right. But my whole point is we can't beat ourselves up because we had the idea to sell it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, where does that get us?
Yeah. I like the point you brought up about like deconstruction. Like, I don't think, we definitely should never throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I don't think that's what he's saying here, because he's saying a criticism for the sake of truth. Like, you're trying to find what's actually true. And so, I don't know. I've just had I've had it happen to me multiple times, and I don't even have the right way to describe it. And it's really hard for me. It seems like I get to this point where like I've built up my ideas and they're not just my ideas, but where they almost be calcify or something. And it's almost like I have to take this next, like, it's almost like a step of faith or something and give it this weird offering to God. And like, and it's like, okay, God, if everything I've thought up to this point is wrong, burn up my books. And it's kind of, but then I find like, even in this weird, like that Calvin and Hobbes strip, this wave comes through and it's almost like this weird little place of turmoil for a second. And like, kind of like the caterpillar going back into the cocoon. And then you come out and you find everything you thought about, all that was true that God gave you had built up in your head remains. And it's much more, but it did take this weird sort of like this offering or leap of faith, or this dissolving into the cocoon again, to where like it's extremely uncomfortable and it's fun to go through, but it's something I've experienced multiple times. And so that's why that image in Calvin and Hobbes usually often comes back to me, where it's just like, okay, now I've got the sandcastle, here you go, God. But then, like I said, when the wave comes in, it's like it walks away the outer shell, but then what's there is like glorious, and it remains, and the stuff is true. Then you can keep going from there or something, and keep revealing, like you said, keep removing more of the clouds around the castle and keep revealing more and more to you, and stuff like that.
Right.
I like that. I think I've said it before, where I'm like, I often find that I'm deconstructing and reconstructing at the exact same time, but that also creates like this.
Well, we should be, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's
otherwise we're static.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly what Jason's talking about, is like you're actually avoiding that like static either orism sort of disposition that you might otherwise come to life with. And somehow there's like this way in which there's some sort of energy that's produced from being in that place, where like you've built this facade, or I don't even know what it is, what the right word is, but like you build this idea, and then like the rug's taken out from underneath you for a second. But like if you're in any other place where like you think that idea can just become rigid and ossified and solid, and suddenly you feel like you can step on it and climb up, it's like, no, better think twice about that, and
right.
Oh.
This is like people waiting to get married till they have everything in order, or waiting, it's like, don't you know that never happens?
Or waiting until you find the right one. And maybe that's important.
Oh, I got to finish my education. I got to get the job. I have to get the salary, which is going to take me 4 years because I got to do an apprenticeship. And then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go, okay, I'm ready. And everyone's like, they're long gone, married, and we got 3 kids already, right? All the prospective spouses. Or something.
Beginning of Peter Pan, he does that. The dad's like trying to calculate how they can afford another kid. It's like adding all this math together and stuff at the beginning of the Peter Pan story. And he's like, and I think they said Michael just barely like snuck through or something like that. Like there was miscalculation or something. But
okay, let's read again, because I think we can actually get this wrapped up. Speaking of true learning, Lord Bacon says, it takes away vain admiration of anything, which is the root of all weakness. Vain admiration. I think that's kind of what you were talking about with the ossification of things, right? That's what it would seem to me, like a vain admiration of something.
Mhm.
The right teacher would have his pupil easy to please, but ill to satisfy. Nice. Ready to enjoy, unready to embrace. Keen to discover beauty, slow to say, here I will dwell. That's exactly what you're talking about before, Luke.
Wow.
He will not confine his instructions to the region of art. He will encourage him to read history with an eager eye for the dawning figure of the past. He will especially show him that a great part of the Bible is only thus to be understood, and that the constant and consistent way of God to be discovered is in fact the key to all history. In the history of individuals as well, he will try to show him how to put sign and token together, constructing not indeed a whole, but a probable suggestion of the whole. I think that he's talking about the symbolic world there, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And again, while showing him the reflex of nature in the poets, he will not be satisfied without sending him to nature herself, urging him in country rambles to keep open eyes for the sweet fashionings and blendings of her operation around him, and in city walks to watch the human face divine. Once more, he will point out to him the essential difference between reverie and thought, between dreaming and imagining. He will teach him not to mistake fancy either in himself or in others, for imagination, and to beware of hunting after resemblances that carry with them no interpretation. Such training is not solely fitted for the possible development of artistic faculty. Few in this world will ever be able to utter what they feel. Fewer still will be able to utter it in forms of their own. Nor is it necessary that there should be many such. But it is necessary that all should feel. It is necessary that all should understand and imagine the good, that all should begin, at least, to follow and find out God. The glory of God is to conceal a thing, but the glory of the king is to find it out, says Solomon. As if, remarks Bacon on the passage, according to the innocent play of children, the divine majesty took delight to hide his works to the end to have them found out, and as if kings could not obtain a greater honor than to be God's playfellows in that game. One more quote from the book of Ecclesiastes, setting forth both the necessity we are under to imagine and the comfort that our imagining cannot outstrip God's making. Quote, I have seen the travail which God has given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. He has made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he has set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God makes from the beginning to the end. Thus, to be playfellows with God in this game, the little ones may gather their daisies and follow their painted moths. The child of the kingdom may pore upon the lilies of the field and gather faith as the birds of the air their food from the leafless hawthorn, ruddy with the stores God has laid up for them. And the man of science, quote, may sit and rightly spell of every star that heaven doth show, and every herb that sips the dew, till old experience do attain to something like prophetic strain. We finished.
Yeah.
Those last two lines just really gave me, till old experience do attain to something like prophetic strain.
Yeah.
Like history reading the future, and yeah.
My favorite part of that whole section, and I keep on thinking back to the part where he's talking about feeling, and how everyone feels, and not everyone will utter what they feel, and maybe it's better that way. And that's
Well, he says it's not necessary that there should be many of those, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah, that's how he said it.
yeah.
He said it a little nicer.
Yeah, yeah. I'm the one that's kind of reading between the lines.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the part I like to about the being playfellows in this game. The glory of God is to conceal the matter, and the glory of kings is to search it out. And
Mhm.
there's this. I'm sure you guys have heard of. It's kind of controversial, I guess, at this point, but Bethel Church in Redding, California, or whatever.
I don't know
I don't know.
anything about it.
Well, they have a pastor there named Bill Johnson, and they've gotten in trouble for, yeah. Well, I don't know if they got in trouble, but just accusations. They're kind of a mega church, but I don't know if any of them are true. I'm not really trying to get into that, but there was one, like I remember him preaching the sermon as that one time, and he was talking about just being a grandfather and watching his grandchildren hunt Easter eggs, and he was tying in that same idea of God like hiding a thing and just having the joy of just watching his grandchildren go out and try to find these little treasures that he's hidden all over the yard for them to go and discover, and kind of bring in that same imagery. So
There's a beautiful metaphor in the castle when things are find their proper order. So in the castle there are a bunch of siblings living together, and they have an older brother and an older sister, but they're constantly quarreling with each other, right? And then I won't tell the whole story because I think anybody listening should read it. Or go to Jess Purviance's channel and listen to his reading.
I did a reading too.
He did a reading of the castle. Yeah. So anyway, when everything is ordered, like when life is peaceful and creative and imaginal, and everybody is in that space, they look out. The sister, I think it's the older sister, looks out of the window and sees the sun coming down and sees the line on the horizon, and right there she catches a glimpse of the father, because their father doesn't live with them. He's gone on some journey, and he and I love it, because what's happening at the horizon, it's when heaven meets earth, right? And it's right there that she gets the glimpse of the father. Yeah. I don't want to talk more about the castle because it's just could talk a lot about it. That's not what we're doing today.
Yeah. It's I would strongly agree that everybody should go read it. He weaves in a lot of different ideas too, like he talks about astrology a little bit in it. I remember he talks about music. I think one of my favorite
He
parts
talks about all the sciences.
The little brother's playing music. Yeah.
Like great. when Jedediah was critiquing his not allowing yourself to engage with the lower fancy type books or whatever, when Jedediah made that critique, I just kept thinking to myself, what's his name now, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland, what's his name? Lewis Carroll. Well, I mean, that wasn't actually his real name, but he wrote that story and he tested it out on George MacDonald's children. And it is weird story. Right? So, like I'm thinking to myself, I don't think George MacDonald would have had a problem with a punk rock band, honestly.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for him offering his children up as a sacrifice to Lewis Carroll, we wouldn't have Alice in Wonderland today.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, I thought it was
right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a good critique though, because I didn't actually. I mean, I thought if he, him reading it that way to kind of, I'm sure other people probably hear it the same way when they read through it, and maybe. I think maybe because I don't know if it's because my mind just didn't go there. Something I didn't really, when we read through it, I didn't really pick up on that Jed brought up, but I thought it was good that he brought it up. But it was making me think about a lot of different things too, because even the way, he says, what was the quote? He knows if a book is worth reading at all, it is worth reading well, and that is, if it is not worth reading, it is only the most accomplished reader that it can be worth skimming. And I don't feel like I'm an accomplished reader, but I have this of doing, like, I've read Fantasties multiple times. That's why I read the Bible over and over and over. Like, I don't read many things. I'll find like one thing and I'm like, oh, I got to read this again. I got to read this again. Like the Golden
and
Key,
it's a
I've
good
read
thing we
multiple
have
times.
you doing that, because we need you
Well,
as
I
a
think some
reference.
of it too is like, I just feel like I've always felt like my reading comprehension's terrible, so I feel like I need to do that. But then at the same time, like, there is this way, when you read it, it almost feels like he's saying, don't bother saying things, like, find what's good. But it's weird because I don't necessarily think he's saying that, and that's why, like, that Jed even critiqued it a little bit, because you have to like skim things. I don't know. It's just making me think of it when I used to gold pan too, and like you go out and you're kind of skimming the whole time, and then first you got to find a spot that looks decent, so you're kind of like skimming the whole landscape, and then when you do, you're like skimming through this dirt, and then
But
all this stuff,
that's
and then
totally different. I've done it, and I know exactly what you're talking. You're not skimming. You're looking actually at the shape of things, and there's something interesting about that, right? Like you get to know, like, as a fisherman, for example, you go to a river and you look at it and you go, oh no, they're not there, they're over there, right? There's a shape. There's a feeling that you get from having made the experience enough times. And I think it's even subconscious. Like you're not like writing down, okay, it needs to be a fallen log and a little bit of shade over the pool, and you're not, you just get a feel, right? Same with panning. You get a feel there's a decline in the stream, or the water rushes through there, or this kind of rock is present, and and then you get down there, and then you're still looking at shapes. You're looking at shapes in the gold pan, right? And you're letting them jump out at you, and you're not being distracted by anything else. And so I find that really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it gets to the point where it's almost like he's talking about too, because when you find that good fishing hole or you find that good spot, then you really, like, you repeat it. You keep going back to that same fishing hole. You keep going back, like you found the good book that's worth reading well. Like you found the good fishing hole that's worth revisiting. You found the good spot. But it is, I don't.
Wasn't it Einstein who said the definition of insanity is how did he put that now? I just had it. Is repeating this same thing over and over with no results, something like that. Like that would be like going to the fishing hole where you never catch anything. And that's the only one you ever go to. People are like, you're insane. I think.
Yeah. But what is it that makes us continue to explore that more deeply? And so, like, if you're not satisfied by not catching fish. So
yeah,
you're not we'll say more. You're not satisfied by catching fish.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just thinking about Sherry's
analogy
with the fishing holes, and like, I don't want to brag, but I'm a pretty decent fisherman.
Yeah.
I've been navigating rivers for a long time here.
I know. That's why I'm using these analogies, because I want you to jump up and say something.
Yeah. And
I'm fishing for you, Luke.
Thank you. With what little energy I have. But I can now pretty much go to any river and navigate and find where these holes are.
Mm-hmm.
But it started doing the same thing over and over again, and you finally get sick of it, and you're like, okay, I need to, like, I don't want to just keep fishing and not catching anything. I want to catch these fish. So like I
Mhm.
tried all these different strategies. But you are right that a lot of it is this you're following your intuition, and you're um I don't
Your
know.
subconscious?
Yeah, your subconscious. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what you said. So
Yeah, like, it's picking to me, the subconscious is picking up all the little things, the smell, the humidity, the time of day, the grass that's
Mhm.
growing, the plants that are accompanying the grass that's
Yeah.
growing, the shrubs that are on the side of the river. You know, like,
Even
you could never actually catalog all the information that you're getting, um,
absolutely not.
right?
And
It's
to
just
even try
in
to like
there, and
encapsulate it and give it to somebody else, and like you can
yeah.
come with me and I can teach you through actual participation. But if you want me to just give you an instruction manual, it will be impossible. Like I and it's always changing too, like
Mhm,
season
mhm.
to season. So you've got to be on top of it and know the patterns and looking, like for instance, like there's a certain uh, strain of steelhead that's a summer run steelhead that you can catch out on the piers that are jetting into Lake Michigan, and you have to be there, and it's right when the water flips. So like for instance, the Lake Michigan will flip from being uh, it'll be really cold, and then it will get warm, and then we'll have a few cold days and it'll flip again. So like the water
Oh,
at the
yeah.
bottom of the lake will flip to the top of the lake, and that is the best time to be out there to catch the Skamania steelhead. And it is the coolest steelhead because it jumps like 6 feet out of the water,
Mm,
and they're skinnier than normal steelhead, so like
right.
they're a completely unique species.
Yeah.
But um and there's no natural reproduction, so like what's there is there, and then they're going to be done for. So like I can still go out and catch these fish, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've tried to teach people how to fish for these fish, and I think I've only successfully taught one person, and it's it's like because it's just highly specific, and the
Mhm,
and the
mhm.
person who taught me was this like 65-year-old man who was sitting out on the pier named Lloyd, and he was catching these fish, and it was like, dude, Lloyd knows this, like, and
Tell me more
so
about Lloyd. I want to
I
hear about
just
Lloyd.
I became an apprentice of Lloyd,
Mhm.
and he took me under his wing and taught me everything, and so I fished right beside him, and he showed me
Love
everything,
it.
Do
Love
you
it.
think Lloyd
including,
is
like
an angel?
yes.
Fish angel.
I think
But
so.
he also had these binoculars, and he would look at the girls walking on bikinis on the other pier, on the other pier, so he was kind of a weird angel.
Oh. You know, Nate and I have talked about this in connection with making food. Like when you cook, if you're a good cook, you can
Yeah,
give somebody a recipe, but
yeah,
all that stuff that's going on in the subconscious, right? Like the amount of heat, the length of time, the how much butter you put in the pan, you know, all
And then they get
it
mad at you.
my kids have
They're
been
like,
trying to make my salad dressing ever since they left home, right? Like, I make
yeah.
my own salad dressing, and they're always
and then
just
they
when they come home, "Mom, make your salad dressing," because they just can't get it right.
because they
What
because
kind
you
of
gave
salad?
us the wrong recipe. You've tricked us.
No, no, I didn't
That's how
make it.
my no. Oh, but that's how it is with my mom's cookies too. My mom makes these cookies and everybody loves them, and she'll give the recipe to people, and they're like, "What's going
I
on? I
don't
can't
taste
make them the same." Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's so
It's
cool.
so
Well,
interesting.
I feel like you both are pretty good masters at that intuition and things like that. I feel like I'm terrible at it. Otherwise, I'd have a bunch of gold, right? Gold painting didn't work out for me too well. I didn't have the intuition
Me either.
for
Me either. I don't have a bunch of gold.
that.
Are you?
Well, even just walking in the woods, I like usually end up touching something bad. I got poison ivy under my eye I told Luke about this, right? Did I tell you?
Yeah, but do you think you'll do it again?
I got staph on my finger, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," and I just rubbed it under my eye, and then I got my eyes swelled up, and I could barely see. And I was like,
Yeah, Jason just takes weird substances that he finds and just like rubs them on his.
yeah, or I'll be out walking in the woods, and I'll be like, "I wonder what would happen if I ate this." And it's like a berry. Like I got a persimmon time, and I ate this unripe persimmon. I thought I was gonna die. It was the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Has done that.
Oh my goodness.
Haven't you played Oregon Trail on Windows 95? Like,
yeah, I played it.
Jason, I don't think you have bad intuition. I just think you ignore it. Oh my goodness. Lucky.
God has lots of mercy on me for sure.
Yeah. I think you know that.
My nephew was visiting from Ontario, and he's like, "Oh, Auntie Sherry, he's got 3 little kids, right?" And he's like, "Yesterday we were eating all kinds of wild onions. We found wild onions down by the creek." And I'm like, "Really? Did you know that Death Camus is just like a wild onion? And you have to be really, really careful?" No. And he's on his phone, And I said,
definitely
don't
eat it.
do that. Don't just go out and eat stuff. Okay. Unless you grew it in the garden and you know what it is, right? Like, man. Like, we get lots of mushrooms here, but I won't eat any of them. I mean, there's some shaggy mane and, the big puffballs and stuff. But there's so many that are, either or, right? And if you're not really, if you don't have a Lloyd in your life, right, to teach you, because it's all about actually going out and paying attention to all the things. Whoops.
Yeah.
That's up. My connection is because it's from here.
I can't believe we finished this essay.
Yeah. Guys, I'm really sorry, but it looks like I have to go. I'm getting a FaceTime.
Yeah, don't worry, because I've been craving falling asleep for like the last 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's late for you. So I'm gonna end the broadcast. Thank you, everybody who's still watching, for watching with us, and we will be back. Not sure when. We're done the essay. I guess we'll have to put our little heads together and figure out what's next on the agenda. Maybe Luke needs a summer break. I don't know. You're pretty busy, right?
I am pretty busy.
You're pretty busy. Okay, well, we'll talk about it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a good night.
So long. Farewell.